Hi there students, it's Mr. Rosette. Today I'm going to show you a little walkthrough on how to create an image using a colorful, cartoony, comic book-like method. So this demo won't be technical, it won't be walking you through how to do every little step, it's just to show the process in general. And so that process starts with scanning in the line art. I then used an eraser and got rid of any flaws and gave it a levels adjust to get rid of any ghostly pencil lines that might have still been visible that weren't erased very well. I hit the whole thing with a color wash, and that's to set the color mood for the entire piece. It's night, it's Halloween, there's going to be yellowish type full moon light, so I decided to use a complementary color palette of violet and yellow. And so I painted a little bit of path light here that I would add all the colors on top of it. All that light's coming from the moon. And then this is kind of an interesting step that you don't really hear of that often. Color flats. Color flats. That's where you assign a basic midtone value to all of the different major forms in the image. The purpose of that is to make it easy to select things digitally. So for example, if I were to go and want to add light and shadow to this roof right here, I would have the color flats layer selected. Using my magic wand, I can just click on the roof and it selects everything for me. I can then go in and paint, add light, dark, and all sorts of cool things without having to worry about going outside the lines. And that preserves that whole cartoony effect. I would define a cartoony comic book effect as having solid contours that define each plane, and also very saturated, clearly defined color values, lights, middles, and darks. Then I go to apply light to each one of these things that I've created a color flat for. So the light's coming from the moon, and I just selected each element and then applied a lighting pass. Before, after. That's a pretty big leap. Let's take a look at one of these pumpkins to see what's actually going on here. I selected the color flats, gave it a 1, 2, 3 read, and I used just a hard edge brush. The type of brush that you use doesn't really matter. It just depends on the technique that you're going for. I used a chalk brush. And at this point, the bulk of the image is pretty much done. I'm about 90% through all the lighting, but the rest is all post-processing or post-production, which I'll get into here next. So with that, we know that there is a light source. That light is reacting to the surfaces of all these different elements, but it's also going to cast a shadow. So in a new layer, set to multiply, I painted in the cast shadows, and that grounds all of these colored forms. It gives it a new level of three-dimensional depth to the image. For more style effects, some other fog tendrils that are kind of creeping and crawling like fingers coming towards these poor trick-or-treaters. Again, with a soft edge brush with opacity, and it was a smaller brush. A couple of glow effects for these pumpkins here in the back on the ground. That's an overlay layer, and I sampled the color of the fire and painted that in with a soft edge brush on the ground. Another post-processing effect would be depth of field. I'm focusing on the middle ground, and so that means things in the foreground will blur and things in the background will blur as well. So I just blurred the foreground and the background. To do that, I just cloned all my layers, mashed them all together into one layer, so I've got basically two pictures of the same image, and I applied the blur effect, a Gaussian blur, to the one on the top, having a very blurry version of this image, and underneath it was a crisp one, and I just erased the blurred one with a soft edged eraser, and what was left is the blur, and what was erased ends up looking crisp. This is the fun one to do. It's photo noise. Again, I go over that in other videos, but it's a film grain effect. You can see it really clearly here on the fog, and that gives kind of a cinematic look. And then finally, I again cloned all my layers, mashed them all together, and then did a levels adjust to all of that to increase the contrast to make it more legible for printing. So this is a walkthrough on how to do that fun cartoony effect. Give it a shot. Make some line art, paint in some flats, select the flats, add some light to them, and then maybe apply some post-processing effects, and it really makes for a fun, exciting process with creation. I hope you found this helpful. I look forward to seeing you guys in class. Take care.